Padre Pio told him his father had 3 days to live. 3 days. Not weeks, not months, 3 days. And in those 3 days, a decision would be made that would determine not only the fate of the dying man's soul, but the fate of the son's soul, and the souls of his children, and the souls of their children after them. Padre Pio said this with tears running down his face, not tears of sadness, tears of terror, because what he saw when he looked at this man's soul was not a wound. It was a chain that had been forged link by link over 3 generations, and it was about to be sealed forever by 2 words. He said no. The man's name was Stefano Ferrara, and he had every reason in the world to say no. Every human, natural, understandable reason. But Padre Pio did not deal in human reasons. He dealt in spiritual realities. And the spiritual reality of Stefano's refusal was something so devastating, so far-reaching, and so irreversible that Padre Pio later told the Capuchin brothers it haunted him for weeks. Let me tell you something most people do not realize about forgiveness. We think forgiveness is something we give to the person who hurt us, a gift we offer, a mercy we extend, a debt we cancel. And that is partly true, but it is only the surface. The deeper truth, the truth that Padre Pio understood better than almost anyone who has ever lived, is that forgiveness is not primarily about the other person. Forgiveness is the key that unlocks the chain around your own soul. When you refuse to forgive, you are not punishing the person who hurt you. You are locking yourself inside a prison that gets smaller and darker with every year that passes. And the most terrifying thing about this prison is that after a while, you cannot tell you are in it. You think you are free. You think you have moved on. You think the anger has faded. But Padre Pio could see the chains. He could see them as clearly as you and I see the hands in front of our faces. And when he looked at Stefano Ferrara, he saw chains so old and so thick that they had become part of the man's spiritual skeleton. You are about to hear the story of what happened between Stefano and his father, Vincenzo. You will learn what Vincenzo did that created the wound. You will see the moment at the deathbed when forgiveness was offered and refused. You will hear what Padre Pio saw in the spiritual realm when Stefano spoke those 2 words. And most importantly, you will learn about a generational pattern, a chain of unforgiveness that stretched back 3 generations that Padre Pio exposed and, by the grace of God, eventually helped to break. Because this story does not end in darkness. It ends in hope. But the path between the darkness and the hope is longer and harder than you might expect. And it begins in a small farming village near Foggia in the year 1936. Vincenzo Ferrara was a farmer, not a successful farmer, not a prosperous farmer, a farmer who worked land that belonged to someone else, who rose before dawn and returned after dark, who smelled of earth and sweat, and the particular exhaustion of a man who knows that no matter how hard he works, he will never own the ground beneath his feet. He married Rosa Cataldi in 1933, a quiet, devout woman who attended Mass every morning and prayed the rosary every night, and believed with every fiber of her being that God would provide. They had 2 children. Stefano was born in 1934, and his sister Maria was born in 1937. For the first 8 years of Stefano's life, the family was poor but complete. Vincenzo was not a warm father. He was not a man who held his children or spoke words of affection. He came from a generation and a region where men showed love through labor, not language. He worked, he provided, he sat at the table and ate in silence and went to bed and rose again before the sun. But he was present, he was there. And for a child, presence is the first and most essential form of love. In 1942, when Stefano was 8 years old, Vincenzo met a woman named Agnese Ferretti at the market in Lucera. What happened between them does not need to be described in detail because the details do not matter as much as the consequences. Within 6 months, Vincenzo had left his family. He moved to Lucera with Agnese. He did not explain. He did not apologize. He did not say goodbye to his children. He simply was there one evening, sitting at the table in silence as he always did. And the next morning, the chair was empty, and it stayed empty for the rest of Stefano's childhood. Rosa did not collapse. She did not rage. She went to Mass that morning, as she did every morning, and when she came home, she told Stefano and Maria that their father had gone away and that they must pray for him. She did not say he was a bad man. She did not say he had abandoned them. She said, "Your father is lost, and we must pray that God finds him and brings him home." She said this with such calm that Stefano, at 8 years old, believed her. He believed his father would come home. He prayed for it every night. He prayed for months, and then he prayed for years, and his father never came home. Rosa took in laundry. She cleaned houses. She worked in the olive groves during harvest season. She did everything a woman alone could do in southern Italy in the 1940s, which was not much and was never enough. She grew thin. Her hands cracked from the lye soap and the cold water. She coughed through the winters and worked through the coughs. She never complained. She never stopped going to Mass. She never stopped praying the rosary, and she never said a single word against Vincenzo. Stefano, however, was not his mother. By the time he was 12, the prayers for his father had stopped. By the time he was 14, the prayers had been replaced by something else. Not hatred exactly, something colder than hatred, something quieter, a decision, a wall built stone by stone, year by year, in the deepest part of his heart. The wall said, "My father does not exist. He is dead to me. He chose to leave, and I choose to let him go, and the space where he used to be is filled now with something hard and permanent, and I will never, never open that door again." When Stefano was 19, Rosa died. She died in January of 1953, during one of the coldest winters anyone could remember. The cause was pneumonia, but Stefano knew the real cause: exhaustion, poverty. A broken heart that she had hidden behind a veil of prayer and faith for 11 years. She died in her bed, holding her rosary, with Stefano on one side and Maria on the other. Her last words were, "Forgive your father, not for his sake, for yours." Stefano heard the words. He did not answer. He held her hand until it went cold, and then he walked out of the house and stood in the frozen street and made a vow that he never spoke aloud, but that became the defining structure of his soul. "I will never forgive him. He killed my mother, and I will carry that truth until the day I die." I need to stop here for a moment because I know this feeling. I lost my mother when I was 14 to leukemia, and there were things I never got to say, things I never got to resolve, and the weight of those unsaid words sat inside me for years, like a stone in my chest. When I read about Stefano standing in that frozen street, I recognized the architecture of that wall. I have built walls like that, against my husband David. During those terrible months when his faith crumbled and I felt abandoned by the one person who was supposed to stand with me before God. I built a wall, not as tall as Stefano's, not as thick, but a wall nonetheless. And I can tell you from experience that the mortar that holds those walls together is not anger. It is pain. And pain, unlike anger, does not fade with time. It hardens. Stefano married a woman named Elena Caruso in 1955. She was the daughter of a schoolteacher in San Marco in Lamis, a town about 20 kilometers from San Giovanni Rotondo. Elena was kind, patient, and deeply Catholic. She knew about Vincenzo. She knew about the wall. She accepted Stefano as he was, hoping that love and time and faith would soften what anger had hardened. They had 3 children, Matteo in 56, Anna in 58, and little Pietro in 60. For 6 years, Stefano built a life. He worked as a stonecutter, carving the local limestone into blocks for construction. The work suited him. There was something about shaping stone that matched the architecture of his soul. Hard material, precise cuts, no room for softness. He attended Mass every Sunday with Elena and the children. He provided, he was present. But Elena noticed what Rosa had noticed before her. Stefano could not say certain words. He could not say, "I love you." He could not say, "I forgive you." He could not say, "I am sorry." The words were there, somewhere behind the wall, but the wall was too thick for them to pass through. And the children grew up in a home where the father worked and provided and was present, but never said the words that children need to hear to know that they are loved. In the spring of 1961, Stefano received a letter. It was written not by Vincenzo, but by a parish priest in Lucera named Don Antonio Ferretti. Agnese had died 2 years earlier. Vincenzo was now alone, and he was dying. "Cancer of the stomach," the priest wrote. "He has perhaps a month, perhaps less. He asks to see his son before he dies. He asks for your forgiveness." Stefano read the letter. He read it once, standing in the kitchen, and then he folded it and put it in his pocket and went to work and said nothing to Elena about it for 3 days. On the 3rd day, Elena found the letter in his work trousers while doing the laundry. She read it. That evening she placed it on the kitchen table beside his plate and said nothing. Stefano looked at it. He looked at Elena, and he said, "No." Elena did not argue. She did not plead. She said one sentence: "Talk to Padre Pio before you decide." This is the detail that changed the trajectory of this entire story, because Elena was right, and she was right for reasons she could not have fully understood at the time. She knew that Padre Pio could see things that ordinary people could not. She knew that the old friar in San Giovanni Rotondo had the gift of reading souls. What she did not know, what no one knew, was that Padre Pio had already seen Stefano's soul. Not in a confessional, not in a church, in a vision. Padre Pio had been praying in his cell one evening in early March, when he saw, as he later described it to Brother Pellegrino, una catena di ferro che attraversava 3 generazioni, an iron chain that crossed 3 generations. He saw a grandfather, a father and a son, each bound to the next by the same link, each carrying the same wound, each refusing the same mercy. He did not know their names, he did not know their faces. But when Stefano Ferrara walked into his confessional on the morning of March 15, 1961, Padre Pio recognized him immediately, not his face, his chain. "My son," Padre Pio said before Stefano had spoken a word, "your father is dying." Stefano went pale. "How did you know?" "Because I have seen the chain that binds you to him, and I have seen where it leads." Stefano tried to begin his confession, but Padre Pio stopped him. "Before you confess, listen, your father has 3 days, not a month, as the priest told you. 3 days. The cancer has reached his blood. By Friday he will be gone. And what you decide in the next 3 days will not only determine whether your father dies in peace or in agony. It will determine the fate of your own soul and the souls of your children." Stefano was angry. He had not come for a lecture. He had come because Elena insisted, and because some part of him, buried deep beneath the wall, still feared God enough to obey his wife's request. He said, "Father, with respect, you do not know what that man did to us. He abandoned my mother. He left us to starve. My mother died because of him. She worked herself to death because he chose another woman over his family. I owe him nothing, not my presence, not my forgiveness, nothing." Padre Pio listened, and then he said something that Stefano would remember for the rest of his life. "You are right. Your father sinned against you, and against your mother, and against God. His abandonment was a grave sin. The suffering it caused was real, and it was wrong, and God saw every moment of it. I am not asking you to pretend it did not happen. I am not asking you to say it was acceptable. I am not asking you to forget. I am asking you to forgive. And those are entirely different things." Padre Pio paused, and then he continued. "Do you know why your father left?" Stefano's jaw tightened. Because he was selfish, because he was weak, because he chose pleasure over duty. Padre Pio shook his head slowly. "Your father left because his father never forgave him." The silence in the confessional was absolute. "Let me tell you what I saw," Padre Pio said. "Your grandfather, old Domenico Ferrara, was a hard man, a man of the land, a man who measured love in labor and silence. When your father was 17 years old, he made a mistake, a youthful mistake that brought shame to the family. I will not tell you what it was, because it is not mine to tell, and it does not matter. What matters is that Domenico never forgave him. He never spoke of it again. He never acknowledged it again. But from that day forward, something between them died. Your father grew up in a home where forgiveness was absent. He learned that love can be withdrawn permanently. He learned that a single mistake can erase a lifetime of presence. And when he was tested, when the temptation came, when Agnese appeared and offered him something that felt like warmth after decades of cold, he did not have the spiritual resources to resist. Because the part of his soul where forgiveness should have lived, the part that should have been strong enough to hold him in place, had been frozen solid since he was 17 years old. Padre Pio leaned forward. "And now, my son, I look at you, and I see the same ice. You have the same frozen place in your soul that your father had, and it was put there the same way, by a father who could not forgive, by a man who withheld mercy and called it strength. Your grandfather passed the ice to your father passed it to you, and if you do not melt it now, if you do not break this chain now, you will pass it to Matteo, and Matteo will pass it to his children. And the chain will continue, generation after generation, an iron chain of frozen hearts, each link forged by a father who could not say the words, 'I forgive you.' This is what I mean by a generational cycle. Most stories about forgiveness focus on two people, the one who was wronged and the one who did the wrong. But Padre Pio saw a third dimension. He saw the pattern. He saw that unforgiveness is not just a sin committed by one person against another. It is a spiritual disease that moves through bloodlines, the way physical diseases move through genes. It passes from father to son, from generation to generation, growing stronger with each transmission, building thicker walls, forging heavier chains. And this is what terrified him about Stefano Ferrara. Because Stefano was not just one man refusing to forgive one father. He was the third link in a chain. Old Domenico had frozen Vincenzo. Vincenzo, frozen and unable to love properly, had abandoned his family. And now Stefano, frozen by the abandonment, was about to seal the pattern by refusing forgiveness at his father's deathbed. 3 generations, 3 frozen hearts. And if the chain was not broken at this link, at this moment, in this confessional, it would continue until a generation came that had no faith left at all, until the ice had frozen out every trace of God. Padre Pio described what he saw when he looked at Stefano's soul. He used an image that I have never encountered in any other account of his spiritual visions. He said he saw 3 figures standing behind Stefano like shadows. The nearest shadow was Vincenzo. Behind Vincenzo stood Domenico, and behind Domenico stood a figure that Padre Pio could not clearly see, a great-grandfather or an ancestor from even further back, the original source of the ice. Each shadow was connected to the next by a chain that ran through their chests, through the place where the heart should be. And the chain was not made of darkness. It was made of ice. Transparent, rigid, cold. Each link perfectly formed. Each link a moment when forgiveness was asked and denied. And in Stefano's chest, Padre Pio saw the newest link being forged. It was almost complete. It lacked only one thing, the spoken word, the no, the final refusal that would close the link and seal the chain for another generation. "My son," Padre Pio said, his voice trembling, "I am not asking you to forgive your father because he deserves it. He may not deserve it. That is between him and God. I am asking you to forgive him because if you do not, the chain will close around your heart and you will become what he became. Not in the same way. You will not abandon your family. You are a better man than that. But the ice will spread. Elena already feels it. She feels the cold in your words, the absence in your touch, the wall between your heart and hers. And your children feel it. Matteo feels it. He is 5 years old, and he already knows that his father cannot say, "I love you." Do you know what that does to a child, my son? Do you know what it plants in his soul? Stefano was weeping, not softly, not with dignity. He was weeping the way a man weeps when a wall that has stood for 20 years suddenly develops a crack, and the pressure behind it is more than he can bear. He wept, and he could not stop, and Padre Pio sat in the darkness of the confessional and wept with him. But when the tears stopped, Stefano said the words that Padre Pio had feared. "I cannot, Father. I hear everything you say. I believe everything you say, but I cannot. The wall is too high, the ice is too thick. I cannot reach the place where forgiveness lives. I have tried. Before Elena asked me to come here, I tried. I stood in my kitchen and I tried to feel something for my father other than cold, and there was nothing. I am empty where forgiveness should be, and I cannot give what I do not have." Padre Pio was silent for a long time. Then he said something that reveals the depth of his understanding of the human soul and the mechanics of divine grace. "You are right," he said. "You cannot forgive him, not by yourself, not with your own strength. The ice is too thick for human hands to break, but God's hands are not human, and what I'm about to tell you is not a command. It is an invitation. Go to your father, not to forgive him. You are not ready for that. Go to be present. Go to sit beside his bed. Go to let him see your face. Do nothing else. Say nothing else. Simply be there. And while you are there, pray one prayer. Not the prayer of forgiveness, because you cannot pray what you do not feel. Pray instead the prayer of willingness. Say, "Lord, I am not able to forgive, but I am willing to be made willing. Melt the ice that I cannot melt. Break the chain that I cannot break. Do what I cannot do. And start here. Start now. Start in this room where my father is dying." Padre Pio called this la preghiera della disponibilità, the prayer of availability. He said it was the most honest prayer a human being could offer, because it acknowledges both the impossibility of the task and the willingness to let God do what we cannot do ourselves. He said God does not need you to be strong enough to forgive. He needs you to be honest enough to admit that you are not, and brave enough to show up anyway. This changed everything for me, because I have been in that place. After David's crisis of faith, when he stopped going to Mass, when he questioned everything we had built our marriage on, there was a period when I could not forgive him. Not because I was angry, because I was wounded. The wound was so deep that the place where forgiveness should have been was numb, dead, frozen, just like Stefano. And a well-meaning friend told me, "Just forgive him, Margaret. Just let it go." And I wanted to scream, because I could not let go of something that was embedded in my bones. It was like telling someone with a broken leg to just walk. The spirit was willing, but the flesh was shattered. And it was not until years later, reading about Padre Pio's teaching on the prayer of availability, that I understood what I should have done. I should not have tried to forgive. I should have prayed to be made willing to forgive. And then I should have shown up, not with forgiveness in my hand, but with willingness in my heart, and let God do the rest. Stefano left San Giovanni Rotondo that morning carrying Padre Pio's words like a weight and a lifeline at the same time. He drove back to San Marco in Lamis. He told Elena what Padre Pio had said, and then he sat in his kitchen at the same table where he had read Don Antonio's letter, and he made a decision that was not forgiveness, but was the first step toward it. He would go. He would go to Lucera. He would sit beside his father's bed. He would not promise to forgive. He would not promise to speak. He would simply be present. And he would pray the prayer of availability, even if the words felt hollow, even if the ice in his chest did not move. Elena drove him. They left before dawn on the morning of March 16th. The drive from San Marco in Lamis to Lucera took less than an hour, but Stefano later said it felt like crossing an ocean. By the time they reached the outskirts of Lucera, Stefano's hands were shaking. Elena reached over and placed her hand on his. She did not say anything. She did not need to. The house was small, a stone cottage on the edge of town, surrounded by a scraggly garden that had clearly been untended for months. Don Antonio met them at the door. He told Stefano that Vincenzo had been asking for him every day, that the cancer had consumed most of his stomach and was now moving through his liver. He said, "Your father is afraid, not of death, of dying without your forgiveness." Stefano walked into the bedroom, and there, in a narrow bed pushed against the whitewashed wall, lay a man he almost did not recognize. Vincenzo Ferrara was 63 years old, but he looked 90. His skin was the color of old wax. His eyes, sunken into hollows so deep they looked like wounds, were open and searching the doorway, and when they found Stefano, they filled with something that Stefano had never seen in his father's face before. Something that the old man, the silent farmer, the man who measured love in labor, had never once in his entire life been able to express. Hope. Vincenzo tried to speak. The words came out as a rasping whisper, barely audible above the sound of his own labored breathing. "Stefano, figlio mio, ti prego, perdonami. Forgive me, my son, please forgive me." Stefano stood in the doorway. He did not move. He did not speak. He looked at his father, this skeleton of a man who had once been the center of his world, and then the source of his deepest wound, and he felt the wall in his chest contract. Not soften, contract, like a fist closing tighter. Every memory of his mother, thin and coughing and dying in a bed just like this one, rose up and demanded that he refuse. "She died because of you," the memories said. "She worked herself to death because you left. You do not deserve forgiveness. You deserve to die alone, the way she felt alone every night for 11 years. Stefano opened his mouth, and instead of the prayer of availability, instead of the words Padre Pio had given him, he heard himself say, "No," one word, 2 letters, the sound of a chain link closing. "No," he said again, "I came because a priest told me to come, but I cannot forgive you. I will not forgive you. You killed my mother. You left us to starve. You chose that woman over your own children. And now you want peace? Now you want absolution? You cannot have it from me. Ask God. Maybe he is more merciful than I am, but I am not God. I am the boy you left standing in an empty kitchen, and that boy does not forgive." Vincenzo closed his eyes. A single tear ran down the wax-colored skin of his cheek and disappeared into the thin pillow. He did not speak again. He had used his last strength to ask, and the answer had been no, and there was nothing left. Stefano walked out of the house. He got into the car. Elena looked at him. She saw the wall. She saw the ice. And she saw something else, something that Stefano could not see in himself. She saw the crack, because Stefano was shaking. His whole body was trembling, not with cold, not with anger, but with the effort of holding the wall in place against a force that was pushing from the other side, a force he could not name and would not acknowledge, the force of his own heart trying to break through the ice. They drove home in silence. Vincenzo Ferrara died on the morning of March 18th, 1961, 3 days, exactly as Padre Pio had said. He died with Don Antonio beside him, administering the last rites, anointing his forehead with holy oil. The young priest later wrote in his parish diary that Vincenzo's final words, whispered so faintly that Don Antonio had to press his ear to the old man's lips, were, "Tell my son that I understand. He has the right. But tell him the chain must break, or Matteo will suffer the way I suffered, the way he suffered, the way my father made us all suffer. Tell him that." Don Antonio wrote to Stefano. The letter arrived 5 days after Vincenzo's funeral. Stefano read it. He read it once, and then he folded it and placed it in the same pocket where the first letter had been. And he said nothing to Elena, and he went back to cutting stone. But Padre Pio's words would not leave him. The image of the chain, the 3 shadows, the ice, the prayer of availability that he had not prayed. The faces of his children at the supper table, especially Matteo, 5 years old, already learning the architecture of his father's silence. The teaching about the generational chain echoed in him like a bell that would not stop ringing, growing louder with each passing week. I need to pause here, because this is the part of the story that reveals the true genius of Padre Pio's spiritual insight. Most of us think that the moment of crisis is the moment of decision, the deathbed, the confrontation, the yes or the no. But Padre Pio knew that the real moment of crisis is not the dramatic scene. It is the quiet aftermath. It is the days and weeks and months after the decision, when the consequences unfold slowly like roots spreading underground, invisible but relentless. And for Stefano, the consequences began immediately. Within a month of Vincenzo's death, Stefano noticed something that disturbed him profoundly. Matteo, who had always been a cheerful child, began to withdraw. He stopped asking his father to play. He stopped running to the door when Stefano came home from work. He became quiet, watchful. And one evening, when Elena asked Matteo to give his father a goodnight kiss, the boy crossed the room, kissed Stefano on the cheek with the perfunctory precision of a duty fulfilled, and walked away without a word. No smile, no embrace, no lingering. Just the kiss and the departure and the empty air where warmth should have been. Elena saw it. She said, "He is becoming you." 3 words, "He is becoming you." And those 3 words cracked the wall that Vincenzo's dying plea could not crack. Because Stefano suddenly saw, with the terrible clarity of a man who has been walking in the dark and suddenly sees a mirror, exactly what Padre Pio had described: the chain, the ice, the pattern. His father had been frozen by his grandfather. He'd been frozen by his father, and now his son was being frozen by him. 3 generations. And the 4th was forming before his eyes, in the body of a 5-year-old boy who was learning night by night that love is expressed through silence, that fathers are present but absent, that the words "I love you" are dangerous because they require vulnerability, and vulnerability leads to pain. Stefano went back to San Giovanni Rotondo. This time he did not go because Elena told him to. He went because the vision of his son's face, the empty kiss, the retreating back, had broken something inside him that 20 years of rage had kept intact. He went to Padre Pio. He knelt in the confessional, and this time, instead of defending himself, instead of explaining his reasons, he said 3 words that Padre Pio later described as the bravest words he had ever heard from a penitent in 50 years of hearing confessions. "Help me, Father. Not I forgive. Not I repent. Help me." The raw, honest, desperate cry of a man who knows he cannot do it alone and has finally stopped pretending he can. Padre Pio began to weep, not from sadness this time, from joy. He said, "My son, you do not know what those 3 words have just done. You have opened a door that has been locked for 3 generations. You have not forgiven yet, but you have asked for help. And that is the beginning. That is the crack through which grace will enter. And once grace enters, the ice does not stand a chance." And then Padre Pio taught Stefano something that I believe is one of the most extraordinary and underappreciated teachings in all of Padre Pio's spiritual legacy. He taught him the practice of il perdono postumo, posthumous forgiveness, because Vincenzo was dead. The moment at the deathbed had passed, the no had been spoken, and many people, many theologians even, would say that it was too late. That forgiveness requires two living parties. That once the person is dead, forgiveness becomes meaningless, a gesture offered to empty air. Padre Pio said this is completely wrong. He said, the soul does not die with the body. Your Father's soul is alive. It is in purgatory, and it is waiting, not for the purification of his own sins, which God is already accomplishing. It is waiting for the one thing that no amount of divine purification can provide: your forgiveness. Because your forgiveness is not God's to give, it is yours. God can purify every sin your father committed, but he cannot forgive the sin your father committed against you. Only you can do that. And until you do, there is a part of your father's purgation that cannot be completed, a chain that links his suffering to your refusal, and that chain holds him there. Padre Pio prescribed 3 steps for posthumous forgiveness. The first step was the prayer of release. Stefano was to kneel before a crucifix, picture his father's face, and speak the words aloud. Not in his mind, aloud. Because Padre Pio said that spoken words have a power in the spiritual realm that thought alone does not possess. He was to say, Father, I forgive you, not because you deserved it, not because what you did was right, but because I choose to break the chain. I choose to release you. I choose to release myself, and I choose to release my children from the inheritance of ice that has been passed from your father to you, and from you to me. I break this chain in the name of Jesus Christ, who forgave from the cross, who forgave those who did not ask, who forgave those who did not deserve it, who forgave the very men who were killing him. In his name, I forgive you. Go in peace. The second step was a series of 9 masses offered for Vincenzo's soul. Not just any masses. 9 consecutive First Fridays, each one attended with the specific intention of releasing Vincenzo from purgatory. Padre Pio said that each Mass would weaken one link of the chain, and by the 9th, the chain would be fully broken. He said, the Mass is the most powerful force in the universe, more powerful than ice, more powerful than pride, more powerful than a lifetime of pain. One Mass offered with genuine love and forgiveness can melt what decades of anger have frozen. The third step was the most difficult. Padre Pio told Stefano to go to Vincenzo's grave, to stand before the stone that marked the place where his father's body rested, and to place his hand on the stone and say aloud the words that Vincenzo had waited his entire life to hear from his own father. The words that old Domenico had never spoken, the words that had started the chain. I am proud of you. Not because you were perfect, not because you were good, but because you were my father, and that is enough. Padre Pio said that these words, spoken at the grave, would reach Vincenzo's soul in purgatory like a warm wind reaching a frozen lake. And they would reach backward too, through the chain, touching every link, loosening every frozen connection, offering to every ancestor in the chain the warmth that had been withheld from generation to generation. Few Catholics know this, but Padre Pio taught that the communion of saints is not a one-way street. We pray for the dead, yes, but the dead also pray for us. And when we forgive someone who has died, when we release them from the chains our unforgiveness has placed on them, they are freed to pray for us with a power and an urgency that the living cannot match. Vincenzo, once released, would become Stefano's most powerful intercessor. The very man who had caused the wound would become the one who helped heal it. This is not irony. This is the logic of divine mercy, and it is the possible cure, the path of healing, that makes this story one of hope rather than despair. Stefano followed every step. It took him months. The prayer of release alone took him 3 attempts. The first time, he knelt before the crucifix and could not speak. the words stuck in his throat like stones. He stayed there for an hour, kneeling, silent, unable to force the words past the wall. The second time, he managed to say, "Father, I forgive you," and then he broke down and could not continue. The third time, on a Saturday evening in May, after Elena had taken the children to her mother's house so that Stefano could be alone, he knelt in his bedroom in front of the crucifix that hung above the bed where he and Elena slept, and he spoke the entire prayer. Every word. His voice shook, his hands trembled, the ice in his chest cracked and shifted, and for the first time in 19 years, something warm moved through the place where the wall had been. Not forgiveness yet, not completely. But the beginning of it, the thaw, the first drop of water forming on the surface of a glacier that had stood frozen for 2 decades. He attended the 9 First Friday Masses. Each one was harder and easier than the last. Harder because each Mass forced him to confront another aspect of his father's betrayal, another layer of pain, another frozen memory. Easier because each Mass also brought a corresponding release, a lightening, as if a physical weight were being lifted from his chest pound by pound, week by week. After the 5th Mass, he told Elena that he could breathe more deeply than he had been able to in years. After the 7th, he wept during the consecration, something he had never done before. After the 9th, in November of 1961, he walked home from the church and picked up Matteo, who was now 5.5 years old, and held him and said 3 words he had never said to any of his children: "I love you." Matteo looked at him with wide, startled eyes, and then the boy smiled, not the cautious, watchful smile of a child who does not trust, a real smile, open, unguarded, bright, the smile of a child who has been waiting to hear those words for his entire life and has finally heard them. Elena, watching from the doorway, covered her mouth with her hand and turned away so Stefano would not see her crying. The visit to the grave came last. December of 1961, a cold grey morning in Lucera. Stefano stood before the simple stone that read Vincenzo Ferrara, 1898-1961. He placed his hand on the cold surface, and he said the words that Padre Pio had prescribed: "I am proud of you, not because you were perfect, not because you were good, but because you were my father, and that is enough." And something happened at that grave that Stefano could never explain in rational terms. As he spoke those words, the grey morning shifted. Not dramatically, not miraculously in the way that we imagine miracles. The clouds thinned just enough for a single ray of winter sunlight to fall on the gravestone, warming the surface under Stefano's hand. The light lasted perhaps 30 seconds. Then the clouds closed again, and the grey returned. But in those 30 seconds, Stefano felt something pass through his hand and into the stone and away, downward, like warmth flowing into the frozen earth. And the chain, the iron chain of ice that Padre Pio had described, that had bound 3 generations of Ferrara men in unforgiveness and silence, broke. Stefano felt it break, not heard, felt, in his chest, a snap, like a frozen branch in the sun. And then warmth, flooding, overwhelming, unmistakable warmth. The warmth of a soul that has been freed from a prison it did not know it was in. Don Antonio, who was standing at a respectful distance near the church, later wrote in his parish diary, "When he placed his hand on the stone and spoke, I saw his shoulders drop, as if a physical burden had been lifted. When he turned to leave, his face was different. The hardness was gone. The wall behind his eyes was no longer there. Something had opened in him, or perhaps something had finally closed. Stefano Ferrara went home to San Marco in Lamis and became a different father. Not overnight, not perfectly. The habits of 20 years do not vanish in a day. But the ice was gone. The chain was broken, and without the ice and the chain, the words that had been trapped behind the wall could finally flow. He learned to say, I love you. He learned to say, I am sorry. He learned to hold his children without the stiffness of a man afraid of his own tenderness. Elena said it was like living with a man who had been thawed after being frozen in a glacier. The same man, but warm, and Matteo. This is what matters most, because Matteo is the proof that the chain was broken. Matteo grew up to be a warm father. A present father, a father who held his children and told them he loved them, and who, when his own son made a mistake as a teenager, did not freeze, did not withdraw, did not build a wall. He forgave, immediately, fully, generously, because his father had taught him, by the grace of God and the intercession of Padre Pio, that forgiveness is not weakness. It is the strongest thing a human soul can do. And the chain that had bound the Ferrara men for 3 generations ended with Matteo. It ended because one man, broken and angry and frozen to his core, walked into a confessional and said 3 words, "Help me, Father. If what you have heard today has moved you, if you recognize in Stefano's story the outline of your own walls, your own chains, your own frozen places, I ask you to support this mission through the Super Thanks button below." These teachings from Padre Pio about generational forgiveness, about posthumous healing, about the prayer of availability, are among the most powerful and least known in all of Catholic spirituality. Your support ensures they reach the souls who need them most. Padre Pio promised that those who spread divine truth receive special protection. And so here is what I want to leave with you tonight, not as a command, as an invitation. The same invitation Padre Pio extended to Stefano. If there is someone you have not forgiven, whether they are alive or dead, consider this. Your unforgiveness is not hurting them, it is freezing you. And if you have children, your ice is becoming their ice. Your wall is becoming their wall. Your chain is becoming their chain. And the only person who can break it is you. Not because you are strong enough. You are not. None of us are. But because you can pray the prayer of availability. You can say, Lord, I am not able to forgive, but I am willing to be made willing. That small, honest, humble prayer is enough to crack the ice that 20 years of anger could not melt. While there is life, there is hope. While you are breathing, the chain can be broken. Do not wait until you are strong enough. You will never be strong enough. Forgive now in your weakness, in your pain, in your brokenness, and let God's strength do what yours cannot. Padre Pio said, "The chain of unforgiveness passes from generation to generation like a curse, but forgiveness, spoken aloud and offered freely, breaks every chain. And what grows in its place is not just peace. It is a garden that your children and your grandchildren will walk through for the rest of their lives, breathing air that is warm and clean and free." Tell me in the comments, is there someone you need to forgive? A parent, a spouse, a sibling? Are you carrying a chain that has been passed down through your family? Type "break the chain" if you are ready to pray the prayer of availability tonight. And share this video with anyone in your family who needs to hear it, because the chain does not break by itself. Someone has to be brave enough to say, "It ends with me." Let that someone be you.